Thank you very much for introduction of me. I'm Vasily Kudrin, a partner of HLB Vinesh Audit Company. Since about the beginning of the 2000s, I have been working in risk management area. Risk management as part of corporate governance. Generally, this professional area is represented by special departments in large and medium-sized companies. They help companies cope with risks and manage them, especially when events arise, which have happened very often in recent years. They, in fact, present proliferating crisis. And risk managers should help large and medium-sized companies find a strategy to counter the consequences of the crisis and how to get out of it, to find a variety of strategies, including business exits. Because this is also a strategy. Exit from business, bankruptcy, transfer to another mode, or transferring business to other countries, as some companies in metal mining and metallurgy are now doing. This is also a way to manage risks. My report may seem academic, while there are many practicing lawyers present here. They talk about specific tasks and matters, specific cases. But I didn't just work in organizational risk management. In addition, I worked on international projects related to asset recovery and related investigations. I am also actively involved in forensics. In 2007, I co-founded the Association of Certified Examiners chapter. I am a professional certified expert CFE in this discipline. Therefore, I personally investigated many cases in practice and assisted international companies in returning assets, working in collaboration with lawyers of large firms, and I have seen in international practice, that the most successful cases arise when a lawyer actually works well in coordination with forensic experts examiners. And very often many results can be achieved at the stage of work of experts. Before the trial, forensic examination, at the stage of pre-trial investigation, this helps to focus efforts on working with corporate decision makers. With owners or directors who can help find where these assets are placed, how exactly they are hidden, and how to return them. A good lawyer just needs to understand how a company generally performs when a crisis occurs, to understand what processes are happening in the business. They very often happen in very similar scenarios. What exactly do managers do? How do they gather to solve the problems of the crisis? What decisions do they make and how different departments of the company are involved? This refers to those departments that obtain information and help the company cope with risks and crises. And practicing lawyers or experts who help companies recover assets must understand where this information came from and what processes are behind it. At the same time, I am faced with the fact that novice specialists, lawyers, sometimes do not understand how such a structure works and where to get this information. But in fact, this is a large class of information. Up to 90% of useful information can be obtained by simply contacting a person via internet. Or you can get real information and even get a specific signed document by conducting a survey or some kind of interview. I myself took part in development of anti-crisis programs, working as a top manager of a large organization, a trading company, and, generally, everything is done according to the same scenarios. Firstly, this could be the use of some kind of anti-crisis or emergency plan, which, as a rule, lies on the shelf. That is, plans prepared by executives for management of risks in emergency situations, business continuity plans. In addition, secondly, it is often used such a tool as strategic sessions. When management gathers in a company and holds an appropriate structured discussion. This is a fact-based discussion aimed, on the one hand, at identifying risks, and, on the other hand, at understanding what to do. This is also a whole series of optimization activities that are immediately implemented. They especially like to do this in financial institutions and retail, and this is a very effective example, but it's, as a rule, for new crises. When a crisis is smoldering, worsening, or growing, and we now have all the signs of this type of crises, then the effective action is the following. It includes conducting periodic anti-crisis diagnostics, as well as various transformation projects or exits from business. Herewith all types of exits may happen, different formats for exiting a business. For example, exiting off some geography, bankruptcy or complete business transformation, or other ways when a company stops activities, or is it just beginning to recover. And now about the strategic session, which I have already briefly talked about. This is when senior officers gather with the task of consolidating and mobilizing their efforts. They need to visualize, study the situation, understand what is happening. In the beginning, they need simply discuss their impressions, and the further task is to conduct a strategic session around risks, discussion on specific future events that could aggravate the situation, events that may happen. These, in fact, are called risks. Next step is an exchange of opinions and collected information about some relevant examples. For example, from competitors and partners, from representatives of the same industry. And this works very well, especially when they ask questions: what do other companies do? What do competitors do? Typically, these exchanges of information are very productive and result in very good action plans being sketched out. Next step is formation or receiving insights. These are examples of new ideas that help a company find good ways out of the crisis. Not just avoiding problems, but searching for business opportunities arising from this crisis. Although many say that the situation can be very bad, that there is no point in talking about opportunities. Indeed, many of the managers I worked with who said that the crisis was a good opportunity then find themselves either abroad or somewhere on the way or in the process of crossing the border. And this is indeed true. Senior managers and entrepreneurs whose names are well known. This is the situation. Sometimes it's difficult to talk about opportunities. Nowadays there is indeed more talk about going out of business, about bankruptcies, about some transformation tasks. Here is a model of a strategy session that I developed in 2008. This is a group of topics and issues are discussed within them. This is everything related to the state. This is work with the population, economics, and inside it means working with financial institutions, real estate, and so on. And for each company you can create its specific ball, a discussion map, and for each of these blocks, when moving through them from top to bottom, the moderator at the session will ask from 2 to 3 separated questions. In the company of my work I usually acted as such a moderator. In general, these also could be risk or compliance managers, controllers, or internal auditors. There may be directors from the board of directors. 2 or 3 questions are asked, and managers discuss what risks may occur, and what to do to prevent these risks from occurring, and how to resist them. And based on the results of these sessions, the following 4 groups of response measures arise on how to get out of the crisis. They are formed depending on how we see these risks will worsen, how impactful these risks are, and how great their likelihood, or probability, is. Those familiar with risk management theory know that risks are assessed in a matrix of significance and probability. How does it work? For example, when everything is good, the risk of bankruptcy remains high, but it is unlikely. But now this category of risks has become a high probability. Therefore, this risk falls into the red zone. And from the point of view of risk management theory, the red zone means avoiding activities that carry this risk. Factually, the solution is either bankruptcy, or some version of managed bankruptcy, or business transformation. For example, they were engaged in selling one thing, but began to sell something completely different. To give an example where the risk is significant but unlikely, then the response is usually transferring. For example, transferring any processes or business to outsourcing, insurance, etc. Let's consider an example when the risk is high in significance, and low in probability. That is, a bunch of small problems arise in one area, but they are all insignificant. In response to this, improvement of internal processes and internal control systems in the company is required. Some enhanced control regime, development of new regulations, strengthening of discipline, improvement of IT procedures against cyber attacks. Because during a crisis, all these problems manifest themselves. Adoption and monitoring as measures occur when risks are low or when they are temporarily absent. This model presents in one slide a lot of knowledge in the risk management area. About how risk management is structured in a company, risks are determined in 4 categories based on business strategy, goals, and business factors: strategic, operational, financial and, finally, compliance. These are legal risks, that is, an important, significant category. And here you need to understand that companies are doing this, building these divisions with appropriate procedures, and it is precisely with the employees of these departments that you need to communicate, and a model of protection lines, when the internal control system is built first in operational processes, and then in various supporting activities, and then in departments that are directly related to risk management and internal control divisions, compliance, and finally, internal audit. And when it comes to asset recovery or bankruptcy procedures, it is worth paying attention to these divisions. You can get a lot of information from there. When I was doing asset recovery projects, because I knew it, I went straight to these specialists. Though sometimes difficult situations were discovered there around a topic of conflicts of interest, situations were identified where they themselves signed documents that led to these problematic asset withdrawals. Although they shouldn't have done that, they should avoid taking responsibility in operations. They should have been involved in monitoring activities, and not making decisions for operational management, and should not help individual unscrupulous managers attach any schemes or scenarios to these processes that ultimately lead to bankruptcy. How can you apply these risk management tools? First of all, we are talking about protecting companies, that is, situations when companies go through crises. Another look at how this is built at the process level. This means that these processes that have goals are studied. Achieving process goals is disrupted by risks, as events that lead to failure to achieve goals. And to manage risks, it is necessary to take responses. At the same time, in the case of an anti-crisis program, when considering and revising goals and understanding risks, they focus more on the safety of the business. Examples of pre-crisis goals are to gain market share, to improve human potential, to mine or produce more, to accomplish more. And with the onset of a crisis, the goals are more about safety. Old goals are redrawn and goals are formulated with a focus on the safety of assets and business. As for risks, attention is paid to the most significant of them. They are the first thing people look at and give express assessments of. If earlier risk assessment could be a long process, now it is done quickly, with a maximum of 2 or 3 weeks with full registration. Next is a big focus on finances. If, in general, risk management likes to deal with operational or, for example, IT risks, and they begin to forget a little about finance, here, first of all, it is necessary to look at financial risks. These are liquidity risks, credit risks, and risks of distortion of financial statements. In the anti-crisis program, aimed at protecting the interests of investors, there are more risks of this area, and response measures, such as transfer, exit from business, acceptance, internal control. You can look at the process of diagnosing the state of the company in more detail in my presentation. This is a specific methodology developed by me, with written procedures. It uses tools related to risk indicators, which I will talk about in a little bit. What are risk indicators? These are events that are not directly related to the company's goals, but when they appear, they tell us, indicate that a problematic situation may arise, and these are very specific indicators. This is such an important model that has been put to good use in practice over the last 15 years and is used well by large companies. And risk indicators work very well in pre-crisis and crisis situations. Let me give you an example from everyday life of what risk indicators are. Let's say you are driving a car with the goal of getting to a certain place. It is important that the car does not break down. Yes, these are your goals, your indicators. What can be a risk indicator? Air temperature. Weather that is getting worse. This can cause the road to blur and interrupt your journey. So these are some indicators that are not directly related to your goals, but they are related to certain events that can affect your goals. And usually these are still not key performance indicators. You can't just take a list of company goals, KPIs or corporate objectives and key results. You have to look for them on the side. And when anti-crisis protection is being built, from my point of view, it is necessary to make the correct set of risk indicators to formulate the correct anti-crisis plan to help the company get out of the crisis. Because if indicators show that things will get even worse, then the question arises about the possibility of starting bankruptcy proceedings or exiting the business. Because this can be an important decision, it can be a relevant, business-oriented procedure in many situations. On the slide is an example of risk assessment in anti-crisis protection. Everything is described in very detail, you can see it. And now some words on recommendations. The first recommendation is speed, quickness. Anti-crisis plans need to be done quickly, using an agile approach. They need to be coordinated with existing risk management practices. You need to look for signals and use risk indicators. My contacts. Thank you for your attention. I have been in the field of risk management for a long time, and I noticed that many risk and compliance managers and controllers develop some kind of professional deformation over time. They begin to see a lot of negative colors and talk about problems. When a crisis occurs, on the other hand, there are many investigations, bankruptcy cases, and asset recovery tasks. This, on the contrary, creates large budgets and opportunities for risk management. On the other hand, things don't work out because the economy is shrinking and there is simply no money for these activities. This is a problem, a dilemma that arises. If during the crisis of 2008, when we had more signs of a market, at least mixed economy, it worked. Now, with the search for the positive, all is worse. But still, when dark times come, you need to turn to the light. You still need to be able to see something good. Move into other areas. Look at innovation. For example, I started working in digital financial asset area 5 years ago. A very interesting area. There is a legal field. There is a completely different dimension where processes work. And so it turns out that this area is occupying more and more of our traditional field of activity. And I found a lot of wonderful things in this business, using all my knowledge and skills. The same can be done in general in any field, including legal and compliance. In particular, there are many requests for legal advice related to regulatory issues. I have a mate in Canada who runs a company in the area. Business valued at around $1 billion. He invested in a company that is engaged in the regulatory integration of the tasks of the blockchain area with issues of the traditional order. Regulatory risks. Search for stolen assets hidden through crypto. All this works well. The old is forgotten, the new comes. We need to constantly look a little at how technology develops. In fact, there is a lot of light, a lot of positivity.